Welcome friends. Today I'm featuring two more cards I made using the May 2020 Hero Arts Monthly Card Kit. In this video, I will show you how to measure and cut any size slimline card you want. I'm seeing dies of all different sizes, but neither really fits the size slimline card I like to make, so I make my own. I typically make my cards 3 3/4 inches by 8 1/2 inches. I used a stamped image from the main kit and the same colors on both cards to get a different look on each. Let's get crafty. I'm using 110-pound cardstock as I'll be applying water, so I want to make certain that it's sturdier than my normal 65-pound or 80-pound cardstock. I've placed my card panel into my MISTI and lined up my sentiment where I want to stamp. I applied anti-static powder to prep for heat embossing. Next, I stamp my sentiment using Versamark clear embossing ink. I heat emboss using Brutus Monroe Alabaster White embossing powder. I use a paintbrush to remove embossing powder where I don't want it. I do the exact same thing to my white panel while I let my heat tool warm up. I heat both panels until the powder melts and becomes shiny. You can't see the sentiment yet on camera that I embossed on the white card panel. I wipe the anti-static powder off. A little powder fell on my mat, so I may have turned the bottle over at some point, and it was trapped in the lid and fell out. Here I gently tap the bottom of the bottle and sprinkle the powder all over the panel and moving it around quickly, trying not to get too much in one spot. Next, I do the same with the cherry bomb. Ooh, I'm liking this combo mix. Now I bring in the golden sparkler, and that is awesome. I do the exact same thing on the white panel. Now for the magic. I spritz the water on each panel. Now you can see the sentiment on the white panel. I take a paper towel and blot off a lot of the excess water and moisture. I don't want it to puddle and completely saturate my panels. I apply a little more blue blitz to the white panel and spray with a little more water. I'll set the panels aside to dry. For the popular slimline size 3 1/2 by 8 1/2 inch card, you'd want to score at 3 1/2 inches or wherever you want your fold line to be if you want a different sized card. Score it, turn your scored cardstock over, fold and crease with your bone folder. Next, I'll cut my mats. Since my card base measures 3 3/4 by 8 1/2, I'm going to trim my cardstock to 3 1/2 by 8 1/4. So I'm going to trim off 1/4 of an inch. I'm using the smaller of the tonic trimmers. that measures about 6 inches. So I'm using my T-square ruler to measure the length, the 8 1/4. Because I can't do that because the trimmer only goes to 6 inches, so I need my ruler or some other way to measure. If you want to trim off 1/4 inch, it's easier to use the T-square ruler as I do here. Make sure your cardstock is flush with your trimmer. Remove your ruler once you get your cut blade lined up just where you want to cut. I'm taking the mat down by 1/4 inch on each side because I want to leave a 1/4 inch border around my card. I do the same for the pink card mat. Note, it's easier to use the trimmer if you want to trim off more than 1/4 of an inch. If you start with an 8 1/2 inch long cardstock, you just subtract off the amount you don't want and trim at that point, and you don't have to measure. Here's an example. So from the 1 inch mark to the cut blade is 1 inch. Each square is 1/4 of an inch. From the last quarter to the cut blade is 1/2 inch. And again, each square is 1/4 of an inch. So if you want to trim off, say you want a 7 1/2 inch long mat, you want to trim off 1 inch. Or you want a 7 3/4 inch mat, or you want an 8 inch mat. All you want to do is subtract out from the 8 1/2 what you don't want, and then cut. I'm adding 1/8 inch score tape around the entire mat panel. I love the scrapbook.com score tape. They have it in all sizes, so sometimes I will use 1/4 inch. I'm going to peel off half of the tape on all sides and kind of bend it in the middle and leave it intact as much as possible until I place it on my card base just where I want it. And then once I've got it situated where I want it, I'll peel off or pull off the rest of the tape. This just gives me more wiggle room to adjust if I don't place it in the right spot at first. So I'm going to place my mats on both card bases. Here I've decided that on the white panel, the white embossed image fades into the shimmer powder and it doesn't stand out enough. So I'm going to go ahead and emboss this again on white cardstock with black VersaFine black onyx ink, and that stands out really well. I like that. Here I cut the sentiment using a stitched heart die. I've also cut a larger stitched heart die from black cardstock, cut it in half, and I'm going to use it as a shadow for the back of my white heart. Once I get that lined up where I want it, I'm going to apply some liquid adhesive. Here I trim a bit off of each side, um, just so that I don't have a full heart. I want to trim a little bit off of the heart. So my panel ends up being about 3¼ by 8¼ Next, I decided I wanted just a little more black to offset the colors on this card, so I'm tying a bow with a little bit of string. I've applied my double-sided tape to my panel, and again, just peeled off half of each side and put a little crease in it so that it would make it easy to pull off once I got my panel situated. Now let's take a look back at both cards. Ebony and Ivory is the way I think of them. You make today better is a fitting sentiment. I love how the shimmer powder just glimmers and shines and sparkles. You may not be able to see that on camera, but trust me, it's beautiful. They remind me of a song by Stevie Wonder and Paul McCartney. Ebony and Ivory live together in perfect harmony, side by side on my piano keyboard. And they go on to sing the song. It's just beautiful. I'll be back soon with more inspiration. Thank you so much for joining me. Leave your questions and comments